steps above them. But when they checked the attic, it was empty, until the night they found her sitting in the dark. The woman in the attic. Thud, thud, thud. The noise echoed through the ceiling, breaking the silence of the night. James Taylor sat up in bed, heart pounding. He turned to his wife, Sarah, who was already awake, her eyes wide with fear. "You hear that?" James whispered. Sarah nodded. "It's coming from the attic again." For the past week, the Taylor family had been hearing strange noises every night. At first, they dismissed it as the old house settling, but as the days passed, the sounds became clearer. Slow, deliberate footsteps pacing above their heads. James sighed and glanced at the digital clock on the nightstand. 2:47 a.m. "I'm checking it out in the morning," he muttered, rubbing his face. Sarah gripped his arm. "No, we need to check now." James hesitated. He wasn't the kind of man who scared easily. He had grown up in an old house where the floors creaked and pipes groaned in the middle of the night. But something about these footsteps felt different. Too real. Too intentional. Reluctantly, he got out of bed, grabbed his phone, and turned on the flashlight. The dim hallway stretched before him, the wooden floor cool beneath his feet. Their 6-year-old son, Daniel, was asleep in the room next to the attic entrance. The thought of anything or anyone lurking up there made James's skin crawl. The attic door was a simple pull-down hatch with a foldable ladder. James reached up, grabbed the cord, and pulled. The door creaked as it opened, releasing a small cloud of dust. The ladder unfolded with a groan. Sarah stayed close behind. "Be careful," she whispered. James took a deep breath and climbed up, his flashlight cutting through the darkness. The attic smelled of dust and aged wood, old boxes, forgotten furniture, and a few holiday decorations were scattered around. He swept the light across the space. Nothing looked out of place. Then, thud. James froze. The sound came from the far end of the attic. Slowly, he turned the flashlight toward the noise. His heart pounded as he scanned the shadows. A small wooden rocking chair sat near the corner. It moved just a little, just enough to send a chill down James's spine. His breath caught in his throat. The attic was completely still, yet the chair had shifted, its gentle creak breaking the silence. He didn't wait to investigate. He scrambled down the ladder, nearly slipping in his haste. Sarah grabbed his arm. "What is it? What did you see?" James shook his head. "Nothing," he said, though his voice lacked conviction. "Just old furniture. Probably just the house settling." Sarah frowned, unconvinced. Down the hall, Daniel stirred in his sleep. His small voice mumbled something unintelligible before he turned over. Then, just as James was about to close the attic door, the footsteps started again. This time, they were faster, closer. James yanked the ladder up and slammed the attic door shut. He and Sarah stood in the hallway, staring at the ceiling. Silence. For now, the next morning, James tried to brush off the night's events. After all, attics were creepy places. Drafts could move things. Old wood could creak on its own. But deep down, something didn't sit right with him. At breakfast, Daniel poked at his cereal absent-mindedly. He seemed tired, his eyes slightly puffy. You okay, buddy? James asked. Daniel nodded slowly. The lady kept walking last night. James and Sarah exchanged a look. What lady? Sarah asked gently. Daniel shrugged. The lady in the attic. James felt a chill run down his spine. Daniel, he said carefully, have you seen this lady? Daniel shook his head. No, but she talks sometimes. Sarah's hand tightened around her coffee mug. What does she say? Daniel hesitated. She calls my name, but when I look up, she's not there. James swallowed hard. Maybe it was just a child's imagination. Kids made up stories all the time. But then Daniel whispered something else, something that made James's blood run cold. She says she's waiting. James sat in silence, staring at his son. The words, "She says she's waiting," echoed in his mind, making his stomach churn. He exchanged a worried glance with Sarah, who looked just as unsettled. Daniel, Sarah said gently, when did you hear the lady talking? Daniel poked at his cereal with his spoon. Last night and the night before. She says my name, but she sounds far away. James forced a smile. Maybe you were dreaming, buddy. Daniel shook his head. I don't think so. Sarah reached for James' hand under the table, squeezing it. She was scared, and James couldn't blame her, because for the first time, he was scared too. That afternoon, after dropping Daniel off at school, James decided to check the attic again. Sarah hesitated at the bottom of the ladder. Are you sure about this? James exhaled sharply. I just want to be sure there's nothing up there. Maybe there's a vent or something causing weird noises. He climbed up slowly, flashlight in one hand, his other gripping the ladder tightly. The attic was just as he had left it, dim, dusty, filled with old furniture and forgotten boxes. But something felt different. James moved cautiously, scanning the space. His flashlight landed on the small wooden rocking chair. It was perfectly still. Then, creak. James froze. The sound hadn't come from the chair. It had come from behind him. Slowly he turned. The air felt thick, heavy, as if something unseen was pressing against him. Then his eyes landed on a box in the corner. It was slightly open. The lid tilted just enough to reveal something inside. James hesitated before kneeling down and lifting the lid. Inside was an old, faded dress. It was pale blue, covered in dust. Next to it was a bundle of photographs, their edges yellowed with age. James picked up one and brushed off the dust. It showed a woman with long, dark hair, standing in front of the very house they were living in. Her face was partially turned away, but something about her posture made James uneasy. He flipped through a few more photos. The same woman appeared in each one, sometimes alone, sometimes with another person. In one photo, she stood at the attic window, staring out. James frowned. Who was she? Then, at the bottom of the box, he found something else. A journal. The leather cover was worn, the pages brittle. He opened it carefully, scanning the first page. October the 12th, 1976. The noises are back. Every night I hear footsteps above me, but when I check, there's no one there. James's blood ran cold. He turned another page. October the 20th, 1976. I saw her again. The woman with the long hair. She was standing in the attic corner, watching me. When I blinked, she was gone. James's hands trembled. He flipped to the last entry, November 3rd, 1976. She's in the attic. She won't leave. I can hear her whispering. She's waiting for me. A sudden creak snapped James out of his trance. The rocking chair was moving. James dropped the journal and stumbled back. His breath came in short gasps as he scrambled toward the ladder. As he climbed down, he swore he heard something. A faint whisper, almost like someone saying his name. He slammed the attic door shut and locked it. Sarah was waiting in the hallway. James, what happened? He was pale, his hands shaking. He handed her the journal. We're not alone in this house. Sarah flipped through the pages, her eyes widening with each word. Then, from down the hall, they heard Daniel's voice. Mom, Dad. They turned. Daniel was standing in his bedroom doorway, rubbing his eyes. I heard her again, he whispered. Sarah pulled him close. What did she say? Daniel looked up, his face pale. She said she's coming downstairs. James felt his blood run cold. He exchanged a look with Sarah, who tightened her grip on Daniel's shoulders. She said she's coming downstairs. The words echoed in James's mind, filling him with an unease he couldn't shake. He swallowed, hard, forcing himself to stay calm. Daniel was just a kid. Maybe he had imagined it. Maybe it was just a bad dream. But deep down, James knew better. Danielle, Sarah said softly, kneeling to his level. Where did you hear her? Daniel hesitated. In my room, she was whispering. James tried to keep his voice steady. Did you see her? Daniel shook his head. No, but I heard her steps. They were on the stairs. James's stomach twisted. He turned toward the staircase leading down to the living room. It was empty, dimly lit by the glow of the nightlight in the hallway. Everything looked normal, but it didn't feel normal. Sarah straightened, her face pale. James, we need to do something. We can't just... A sound interrupted her, a single, soft creak. It came from the staircase. James spun around, heart pounding. The house was silent again, but the air felt heavy, charged with something unseen. He stepped forward cautiously, peering down. The living room below was dark, the furniture casting long, eerie shadows. Then he saw it, a shape at the bottom of the stairs just beyond the last step. A shadow stretched unnaturally across the floor. It wasn't cast by any object in the room. It was just there, shifting slightly, as if something or someone was standing just out of sight. James's breath caught in his throat. Sarah saw it too. She grabbed Daniel and pulled him close. James, she whispered urgently. What is that? James didn't answer. Slowly, he reached for the light switch on the wall and flicked it on. The living room flooded with warm light. The shadow was gone. For a long moment, no one moved. The house was silent again, but the oppressive feeling remained. James exhaled shakily, rubbing his temples. This house is playing tricks on us, he muttered. It's an old place. Maybe the lights from outside are casting weird shadows. Sarah wasn't convinced. James, this isn't just in our heads. Daniel has been hearing her. We've been hearing her. You saw that shadow. James didn't want to admit it, but she was right. Daniel tugged on Sarah's sleeve. I don't want to sleep alone tonight. Sarah ran a hand through his hair. You can sleep in our room, okay? Daniel nodded, but his small hands were trembling. James led them back to their bedroom, locking the door behind them. He didn't know if it would make a difference, but it made him feel slightly safer. They settled in, with Daniel curled up between them. The house was quiet now, but James didn't sleep. He kept his eyes on the bedroom door, and somewhere in the silence, he thought he heard it again. Soft whisper, "I'm coming." The next morning, James was running on barely 2 hours of sleep. Sarah looked just as exhausted. "We need to find out who lived here before us," she said over breakfast. "There has to be a reason for all of this." James nodded. "That journal I found in the attic. It belonged to someone who experienced the same thing. If we can figure out who they were, maybe we can find out what happened." After dropping Daniel off at school, James drove to the local records office. The house was old, built in the 1950s, and he was certain there had to be records of previous owners. He was right. After digging through the property files, he found the name of the last recorded owner before them, Margaret Holloway. James frowned. The name didn't sound familiar, but when he searched further, he found an old newspaper clipping. The headline sent a chill through him. "Local woman missing. Feared dead." James read the article carefully. Margaret Holloway had lived in the house alone for years. Neighbors described her as quiet, but kind. Then, one day, she vanished. No signs of forced entry, no evidence of foul play. It was as if she had simply disappeared. The only strange detail, the last place she was seen, was the attic. James's hands trembled as he put the file down. His mind raced with possibilities. Was Margaret still in the house? Was she the one they had been hearing? And if she was, what did she want? That night, James and Sarah sat in bed, whispering so Daniel wouldn't hear. "She disappeared in the attic?" Sarah asked, horrified. James nodded. "They never found her body." Sarah hugged herself. What if she never left? James exhaled. He didn't want to believe it, but deep down, he knew. The whispers, the footsteps, the shadow. Margaret Holloway was still here, and she was waiting. James couldn't shake the feeling of unease as he and Sarah lay in bed that night. Margaret Holloway had vanished without a trace, and now strange things were happening in their house. The whispers, the footsteps, the shifting shadows. It all pointed to one terrifying conclusion. She never left. Sarah shifted beside him, her fingers gripping the blanket tightly. "James, what if she's trying to tell us something?" James exhaled. "Like what?" Sarah hesitated. "Maybe she wants us to find her." James glanced toward the attic door in the hallway. He had locked it the night before, but somehow that didn't make him feel safer. If Margaret had been trapped up there, if she hadn't left, then the attic was more than just an empty space. It was a grave. The night stretched on, quiet but thick with tension. James kept his eyes on the ceiling, listening. Every creak of the house made his skin crawl. Sarah had eventually drifted into an uneasy sleep, but James couldn't rest. Then, just past 2 a.m., it happened again. Thud. James's entire body tensed. Thud, thud, thud. The sound of footsteps. But this time, they weren't coming from the attic. They were in the hallway. James sat up, his heart hammering. He turned to Sarah and shook her gently. "Wake up," he whispered. Sarah stirred, groggy. "What is it?" Then she heard it too. A slow, dragging step, right outside their bedroom door. Sarah's breath hitched. She grabbed Daniel, who was still asleep, and held him close. James forced himself to move. He reached for his phone and turned on the flashlight, aiming it at the door. The soft glow illuminated the wooden surface, but there was nothing unusual. No shadows moving underneath. No sounds. Then, the doorknob turned. Sarah gasped, clutching Daniel tighter. James froze, his breath stuck in his throat. The knob twisted again, harder this time. James stood, every muscle in his body screaming at him to run, but he forced himself forward. He grabbed the door handle just as it started to turn again, and yanked it open. The hallway was empty, but something was different. The attic door, the one James had locked, was open. The ladder had unfolded, leading up into the darkness. James felt his stomach drop. Sarah stood behind him, her voice barely above a whisper. "James, don't go up there." But James knew he had no choice. If they didn't confront whatever was happening, it would never stop. He grabbed the flashlight and stepped toward the attic ladder. His hands trembled as he gripped the wooden steps and climbed up. The attic was just as he had left it, dusty, cluttered with forgotten belongings. The small rocking chair sat in the same place, unmoving. But the air felt different. It was thick, almost suffocating. James swept the flashlight across the space, his pulse hammering. Then he saw it. A door. It was in the far corner of the attic, partially hidden behind a stack of old boxes. James had never noticed it before, had never seen it before. His breath quickened. A locked attic door. What was behind it? He stepped forward cautiously. The closer he got, the stronger the air seemed to press against him, as if something didn't want him there. James reached out and touched the doorknob. It was ice cold. He hesitated, then twisted it. Locked. A sudden noise made James jump. A whisper right behind him. "Don't." James spun around, the flashlight shaking in his grip. No one was there, but the rocking chair was moving. James backed up toward the ladder. He wasn't ready for this. Not yet. He needed more answers. He climbed down quickly and pulled the attic door shut behind him. Sarah was waiting in the hallway, her face pale. "What did you see?" James swallowed hard. "There's a door up there." Sarah frowned. "A door?" James nodded. "It was hidden behind some boxes, and it's locked." Sarah's expression darkened. "James, what if Margaret Holloway is behind that door?" James didn't answer. He didn't have to, because deep down he already knew. Margaret had never left. She was still there, and she was waiting. James couldn't shake the image of the locked attic door from his mind. The way it had been hidden, the ice-cold doorknob, and, worst of all, the whisper that had sent chills down his spine. "Don't." Who had whispered that? Was it Margaret Holloway? And if she was behind that door, what had happened to her? Sarah sat beside him on the bed, cradling a sleeping Daniel in her arms. Her face was pale, her eyes full of fear. "James, we can't ignore this. We need to open that door." James clenched, his jaw. He had been thinking the same thing, but part of him was afraid of what they would find. Still, they couldn't live like this, locked in fear, waiting for footsteps and whispers in the dark. James stood. "I'm getting the crowbar." Minutes later, he climbed back up the attic ladder, Sarah close behind him. She had insisted on coming, even though every fiber of James's being told him to keep her and Daniel away. But Sarah was stubborn, and just as terrified as he was. The attic was eerily quiet. James's flashlight cut through the dust-filled air as they approached the door. It looked older than the rest of the attic, its wooden surface worn and splintered. James gripped the crowbar, wedging it between the frame and the door. He took a deep breath and pried. The wood groaned, resisting at first, but then, crack, the lock gave way. James hesitated. Then, slowly, he pushed the door open. The air inside was different, stale, heavy. The flashlight beam trembled as James stepped inside. The space was small, barely more than a closet, but what lay inside made Sarah gasp. A rocking chair sat in the center of the room, and in it, a figure. James's breath caught. It was a woman, or rather, what remained of her. The skeletal form was draped in tattered, faded blue fabric. Long strands of dark hair still clung to the brittle skull. The hands rested limply on the arms of the chair, fingers curled inward, as if frozen in time. Sarah covered her mouth. Oh my God. James felt his stomach churn. There was no doubt now. This was Margaret Holloway, and she had been locked in here for decades. The next few hours were a blur. The police arrived after James and Sarah called them, and soon their attic was swarmed with investigators. The remains were carefully removed, and the house was treated like a crime scene. James and Sarah sat downstairs, holding Daniel close as officers moved in and out. Eventually, a detective approached them. "We believe she was locked inside deliberately," he said grimly. "There are no signs she tried to escape. No scratches on the inside of the door. No damage to the chair. It's like she just sat there and wasted away." A chill ran through James. "But why?" The detective sighed. "We don't know yet, but from what we found, she lived alone. No family, no visitors. It's possible she suffered from an illness, or perhaps someone locked her in there against her will." Sarah shuddered. "Who would do something like that?" The detective shook his head. "We may never know." That night, the house felt different. The air was lighter. The eerie silence that had once felt suffocating was now just silence. Daniel slept peacefully in his own bed for the first time in weeks. James and Sarah lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The events of the day still haunted them, but deep down, they felt something else too. Relief. Margaret Holloway had been found, and wherever she was now, she was finally free.